Most of us will see feeling quite pleasant with temperatures in the south 11 or 12 Celsius, Glasgow 9, Belfast 9 or 10 as well. Feeling colder in the wind in the northeast, which will still bring a few showers here during Thursday evening, but for most it'll be light winds on Thursday night, leading into quite a cold start on Friday morning. More likely to see pockets of frost around to begin with on Friday, but we're also going to see some fine sunny weather again on Friday morning before things steadily cloud over from the west. Again, there'll be some rain at times across northern and western Scotland, and we could see a little bit for Northern Ireland, northwest England and Wales come the end of the day. But it looks fairly light and patchy. East Anglia, southeast England hanging on to the brightness, but definitely more changeable in the outlook, and there is the possibility of some wet and windy weather on Sunday.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into the things that have got you talking today.
I am getting on with the job.
Getting on with the job, well, that's all well and good, isn't it? Except not many people seem to be letting him do so. And today the squeeze on Boris continues with more allegations, this time about animals in Afghanistan. Look, we're hopefully at the tail end of the pandemic. We've got a cost of living crisis, a broken NHS, soaring inflation, an economy to rebuild, and maybe even a war on the horizon. Is this really the time to be trying to change Britain's Prime Minister? I say no, but do you agree? And you'll all remember the horrific murder of little Star Hobson in 2020. It was yet another example of a child failed by the services supposed to protect them. Well, now the council responsible for the region where she was murdered has been stripped of their children's social care services and the responsibility given to a new trust to drive improvements. Will this really be the start of pivotal change, or is it more of the same old, same old? And the future is technology, or so we're told, which is great when it works. But what about when it doesn't? Let's take, for example, self-drive cars that might soon be commonplace on our roads. Great, but who's liable when things go wrong? Is it the person in the driver's seat? Or is it the car company? We'll have that to come and more, but first, let's have a look at the latest news headlines.
Michelle, thank you. I'm Polly Middlehurst in the GB newsroom, and our top story today. The Prime Minister has told the Commons he will not resign after the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer accused him of misleading Parliament on the Downing Street parties. Labour is demanding Sue Gray's report into those alleged parties will be published in full after Cabinet Ministers previously suggested the findings may be redacted for security reasons. Number 10 has confirmed today it still hasn't received the report.
On the 8th of December, the Prime Minister told this House, "I have been repeatedly assured since these allegations emerged there was no party." So since he acknowledges the ministerial code applies to him, will he now resign?
No, Mr. Speaker.
Sir Keir Starmer speaking earlier on today. Well, away from home news and to international matters. Within the last few moments, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has been urging Americans who are based in Ukraine to leave. Strongly consider leaving now, he said, amid concerns President Putin could be about to invade the country. Antony Blinken said that the security situation in the country is unpredictable due to the increased threat of Russian military action. Russia has around 100,000 troops on its border with Ukraine. Here, the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss said the UK hasn't ruled out imposing sanctions against President Putin personally if he gives the go-ahead for an invasion. Russia expert Keir Giles told GB News earlier Russian military tactics can be brutal.
They think that terrorizing the civilian population by bombarding them with air and missile strikes is a good way to win a war. So that is the kind of threat that Ukraine is actually now facing.
Keir Giles. Well, in other news today, Downing Street has insisted Boris Johnson had no role in authorising the evacuation of animal welfare activist Pen Farthing and his animals from Afghanistan. It comes after an email was released by the Foreign Affairs Committee, which indicated the Prime Minister did approve a charter flight for the former Marine after Kabul fell to the Taliban last summer. The rescue effort led to allegations that animals had been prioritised over people. During an interview in December last year, Boris Johnson asked if he had authorised the evacuation.
No, that's complete nonsense. But what I can tell you is that I think that the operation of pitting to airlift 15,000 people out of Kabul in the way that we did over the summer was one of the outstanding military achievements of the last 50 years or more.
Boris Johnson speaking last year. Now, a new study suggests that children and teenagers are keeping COVID infection levels high in England. Data from the last few weeks shows that although coronavirus infections have slowed, primary school children do have a higher rate than the general population. The Health Department study also found that 2/3 of people who recently contracted the Omicron variant say they had been infected before. Sainsbury's has said today customers should still use a face covering if they're able to, despite Plan B rules ending for England tomorrow. John Lewis has also spoken on this, saying it will suggest people wear face coverings in its stores and Waitrose shops, but adds it's down to personal choice. The Shop Workers Union, Usdaw, says it's pleased some retailers are keeping in place COVID safety measures. The Scottish Government has published a bill which would make some of its emergency COVID powers permanent. The Coronavirus Recovery and Reform Bill would give ministers the powers to impose lockdowns and restrict access to schools in the event of future public health emergencies. Critics of the reforms have described them as an unacceptable power grab by the SNP. The United States Coast Guard has recovered a body from the water after its boat capsized off the coast of Florida. It comes after a man was rescued after he was found clinging to vessels upturned in the water. Officials believe human smugglers were trying to ferry 39 people to the States from the Bahamas. No one was wearing life jackets when they were hit by severe weather conditions several days ago. The president of FIFA is under fire for suggesting changes in the football calendar could save migrant lives. Gianni Infantino claims holding a World Cup every 2 years instead of every 4 would discourage Africans from attempting to cross the Mediterranean. Anti-racism organisation Kick It Out say the comments are completely unacceptable. Gianni Infantino made the statement in a speech to the Council of Europe.
We need to find ways to include the entire world, to give hope to Africans so that they don't need to cross the Mediterranean in order to find maybe a better life, but more probably death in the sea.
Gianna Infantino. Now, astronomers have discovered what they're describing as a spooky object around 4,000 light years from planet Earth. Believed to be a neutron star, or to you and me, a white dwarf. The object is apparently spinning through space, releasing bright bursts of energy about 3 times an hour. Astrophysicists say the star had been predicted to exist theoretically, but finding one was completely unexpected. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you're with GB News. Now more from Michelle and Dewbs & Co.
Hello there. Thanks for that, Polly. Well, keeping me company until 7 o'clock, my panel. We've got Daniel Moylan, the former advisor to Boris Johnson, now Conservative life peer in the House of Lords. We've got Peter Edwards, the former editor of The Labour List, and Joanna Williams, author and academic. And you know the drill by now on Dewbs & Co. It's not just about us, it's about you at home and your thoughts. Get in touch with me and tell me, what are you thinking tonight? What's on your mind? You can email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. Now, I cannot be, surely, the only person that is getting, and I'm trying to be polite now, quite bored of the repeated onslaughts, whatever you want to call it, witch hunt, pressure, I don't know, call it what you want. But all of the kind of goings on focusing are on Boris Johnson at the moment. If it's not one thing, it's another. This desperate urge to try and find something, anything, it feels like, to pin on him. Got to say, though, he was on bullish form at Prime Minister's questions at this lunchtime and repeatedly. And I had to say repeatedly because if I had a penny, a pound for every time he was asked, are you going to resign, I'd be quite wealthy by now. Anyway, repeatedly refused to resign as the publication of the Sue Gray report looms. He says his government has got the big calls right. Let's have a listen.
Many people may want me out of the way, but I tell you the reason he wants me out of the way is because he knows that this government can be trusted to deliver. And we did. And we delivered on Brexit, Mr. Speaker. He voted 48 times. He voted 48 times to take this country back into the European Union. We delivered. He did. He can't be trusted. We delivered the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, Mr. Speaker, and we will deliver on our plan to unite and level up across the whole of the UK. Crime down 10%, Mr. Speaker. Job vacancies at a record high. Colossal investment in... Yes, Mr. Speaker, we're delivering and they have no plan. 3 times as much tech investment as France in this country, twice as much as Germany. We have a vision for this country as the most prosperous and successful economy in Europe because we are going to unite and level up. The problem with the Labour Party today, Mr. Speaker, is that he's a lawyer, not a leader. That's the truth.
There you go, a lawyer, not a leader. Well, I say it's relentless because since PMQs, he's now been accused of lying more. This time about authorising the controversial rescue of cats and dogs from a British animal charity in Afghanistan. I try my best not to want to headbutt this desk, Lord Moylan, but sometimes it is quite difficult. You are a former advisor to Boris Johnson. What do you make of all this?
Well, it is a relentless campaign. It's orchestrated. It's come in waves over the last few months. The Partygate scandal, so-called, is the latest manifestation. It was wallpaper before. People are picking up on things and, in a coordinated way, trying to delegitimise the Prime Minister. But he's absolutely right. He has got the big calls right. He has delivered Brexit. There's work still to do on Northern Ireland, but he has delivered Brexit. He has got the vaccine rollout, and that's really great that we not only ordered a vaccine, but we actually commissioned it, we funded it, developed it, which is why we were able to get it at cost. We've got the booster campaign, the rollout of the vaccine and the booster campaign that followed it. We're the fastest out of the pandemic, it seems, compared to any other country. The economy, the International Monetary Fund said yesterday, The economy is projected to grow faster this year than any other G7 economy. So we've got a real spirit of optimism. We're really on a roll. This is absolutely not the time to say that what the country needs is a 3-month Conservative leadership contest. While there are threats on every side, there's tragic potential of war between a Russian invasion of Ukraine, and this is just not the time to do that. Meanwhile, people are talking about cakes. For God's sake, I agree with you. I think increasing numbers of people are bored to death with this. They want it to stop, and they want the Prime Minister to carry on and the government carry on running the country.
Is that what you want, Peter Edwards?
Well, I'd like someone to run the country. I don't know who's running it at the moment. Let's not relitigate every single dot and comma of the scandals. We know there's been 17 parties, and I think, as you said in your intro, we're all a bit sick of hearing about them. We're waiting for the Sue Gray report. Let's just zoom out for a minute. I give credit to the vaccine task force because Britain had a great start to the vaccine rollout. I think we've been overtaken a bit subsequently. Let's not talk about late lockdown. Clearly, there's a point, and I think it's nothing to do with party politics, about excess deaths in Britain had versus other major countries. I want to pick up on a different thing, and maybe we have a less partisan debate. Lots of what we heard in the news bulletin, it wasn't about the government have done X. It was Downing Street denies. That's a phrase I've heard again and again over the last fortnight. Downing Street denies. So we all have our view on Boris Johnson, and my view is he's not truthful on a persistent basis, but he's not leading, he's not governing. Every story is Downing Street denies. The levelling up, if you want to call it that, has barely even begun. So what is the government doing, if anything?
What's your thoughts, Joanna?
Well, I think the reason why every story is beginning with Downing Street denies is because there does seem to be some kind of concerted media campaign, or whether we're all bound up in Dominic Cummings' psychodrama, revenge tragedy playing out. It's very hard not to see it in that way. This constant drip, drip, drip feed of stories, does seem designed to keep this keep this at the forefront of our attention. So, of course, that Boris Johnson is having to deny all these things because these accusations keep being made against him. My view is that Boris Johnson was elected for one thing and one thing only, and that was to get Brexit done. And he did that within 6 weeks of being elected, and that's really quite a remarkable achievement. And it's off the back of that, we've got to remember, that he was able to push through with the vaccine rollout way ahead of the EU. Now, if we'd still been in the EU, there's nothing to say that we would have had the vaccine roll out as effectively as we have done. So I think that was a really, really great call. The problem is, since then, what's happened since then? And, I think Afghanistan was not a great triumph. I think that was messed up. The personal living costs of people's lives we are feeling the squeeze now, and that's only going to get worse. And there doesn't seem to really be much of an effort to take that very seriously. You've got rising fuel costs, more people going to be plunged into fuel poverty. Where's the plan for tackling that? And it's no good Boris Johnson just saying, oh, net zero, net zero, net zero, because you can build windmills around the entire coast of the UK. We're still going to have high energy prices, with people are still going to struggle to heat their homes. So I think personally it's a very, very mixed picture. I think Boris has got some of the big calls right. Some of the things have been an absolute disaster. Other things are just a bit bare. Nothing really has happened. Having said that, though, if a Prime Minister with an 80-seat majority is brought down over a Colin the Caterpillar cake from Marks and Spencer's, I think that would be a real insult to democracy in this country. I think it should be, it needs to be for the people to decide what happens, not for Dominic Cummings or a few people who are setting the agenda in the media.
But it's not a cake, just come back on it briefly. We have got to be clear, it's not a cake. We've heard from the COVID survivors group and the relatives of the dead who said goodbye to their loved ones on a tablet or a mobile phone. This is not Boris Johnson potentially being brought down over a birthday cake, is it? It's widespread revulsion over the apparent breaching of lockdown measures, and it's revulsion among the bereaved families, not party political folk in Westminster purely.
Peter, I think you've called it wrong there, because I think what the
you say that most weeks.
I think what the revulsion is over is with the rules. And I think this is another big smokescreen in this discussion. I think the problem that you're describing is that it was absolutely inhumane to leave people to die alone. Now, Boris Johnson made those rules and he should be held to account for making them in the first place and for breaking them. But let's be absolutely clear, it was the rules that were the problem.
That's not what I'm describing. I'm describing hypocrisy and disgust.
No,
by people who
I'm
lost
saying...
Okay, so you can describe your position and I'll describe mine.
Nobody should have been left to die alone. Children should not have been locked up in the homes of abusive parents. Lockdown was an immoral, unjustifiable position. And you know, what's being shown by all these Downing Street parties is that clearly they were not scared of coronavirus.
I'm interested in your view. You're a former advisor to Boris. If you was advising Boris in the here and now, because it is relentless, it's every single day. The reason Peter's saying there's a constant denial every day and whatever every day is because there's a constant allegation, accusation, suggestion every single day. What would you be saying to Boris to do right now?
Well, the first thing I'd be saying is that, you know, to Conservative MPs is, do you want to choose a Prime Minister and a leader of the party, or do you want Dominic Cummings to choose them for you? Because let's flush this out. Let's flush this out. We're going to get a constant drip of stuff from Dominic Cummings. If you don't have the backbone to stand up to that and actually see it off for what it is, an attempt to change the Prime Minister of the country without bothering with an election, then you're a pretty poor bunch of Tory MPs. So that's the first thing I'd be saying. Second thing is, I'd be acknowledging some of what Joanna said, and that is we haven't got made the progress with the domestic agenda we would have wanted to. And part of that, be fair, Joanna, is that the government was very quickly, after it was re-elected, was very quickly knocked away from its, what you might call its normal course, by the extraordinary events of the pandemic. Did the government get everything right about that? Should there have been a lockdown? Did the lockdown actually work? Those are really, really good questions. And were some of the things that happened in the end cruel? I think they probably were. Did they make a huge difference in the spread of the pandemic, spread of the virus? I'm not entirely sure. We're going to have an inquiry to look into all of that. But now that we've got to this position, Joanna, and you know, where we can actually start to put the pandemic behind us, I think it's fair to give Boris and the government a crack at getting back on that agenda that they were distracted from for so long by this totally unexpected and unpredictable event, although some pandemic might have happened, like an asteroid might have hit the Earth. It was predictable in that sense, but it wasn't something that was expected. It wasn't something that any of us were thinking was going to happen.
But on Dominic Cummings, I mean, you know, I agree with you, essentially. I absolutely do not think it should be down to Dominic Cummings to dictate who is the Prime Minister of this country and when Boris Johnson should resign. And he seems to have some crazy idea that it is down to him. But the problem is Boris Johnson's kind of made a rod for his own back. If he'd been more honest with the public, if he'd not taken us for fools, if he'd not attempted to lie about parties or be less than honest, let's say, about what had happened, this story would have been done and dusted in November. We could have put a lid on it over then and the debate could have moved on by now. But it's because Boris Johnson and Downing Street have allowed essentially this story to continue gathering momentum because they've been less than 100% honest. They've allowed this situation to come about where stories have dripped out over time. And that's really unhelpful. You know, Boris Johnson should have come out straight away and said, yes, I made a mistake, we've done things wrong, you know, these parties happened. Either he made a mistake or he regretted it, or some of them are clearly non-parties. You know, I think having wine and cheese around a table in your garden, you know, nobody's going to lose sleep over that. You know, clearly some of these were parties, and it was bad that my daughter, for example, couldn't have friends round to her birthday party, and yet clearly other things were happening in Downing Street. You know, there's not many people are very happy about that situation, but it's because Boris Johnson and the government have handled this so badly that Dominic Cummings has been allowed to get the upper hand in the way he has.
Daniel, quick question. Do you think Boris Johnson has ever told a lie in elected office?
No, I don't think he has. I really don't. I don't think he's told a lie in his official capacity. I worked with him for 8 years when he was Mayor of London, nearly 8 years. And he would go out and talk the whole time. And I knew that everything he was saying was justified and warranted. It was no pattern of lying involved.
So you're happy with this phrase, no rules were broken?
Well, we're going to see what Sue Gray says as an independent person, but I certainly believe that that was his honest opinion at the time that he said it. Now, we're going to have a separate independent look at that, and you may have a different view as to what the rules meant, what they said. But I absolutely believe that's what he believed at the time he said it, having taken advice.
I think the problem is with that line of argument is Boris Johnson is either asking people to believe that he either lied or he's stupid, basically. I mean, that's the choice he's presenting to the public.
That's absolutely not the case. First of all, as I said in your programme before, Downing Street is it's got one nice front door, looks like a house. It's actually a huge office block. It's got basements. The President of America lives in the White House. You don't expect him to know what's happening in the basement offices all the time. And it's just the same with Boris. There are things he knows and things he doesn't know. He'll have known where he was, what he was taken to. His private secretaries, officials would have said, we're going to this now, Prime Minister, and it's this. And they'll have explained it. What they said to him, that's going to be part of what the Sue Gray report is about, what he knew in advance. He turns up, stays 10 minutes, or he stays 25 minutes, he goes away. Does he know, when he's at Chequers 60 miles away, there are parties going on in the basement back in London?
No, but if you turn up into your garden...
And he doesn't know that. No, but he doesn't know that, and he doesn't know what... You're allowed to sit round desks in an office during the day, and somehow it's evil if you then go out into the much healthier environment of the garden.
No, absolutely.
Which is much better from a pandemic point of view, with the same people. And that's somehow making it worse.
But when there are 40 people in your garden and there are trestle tables with food and cake and wine...
Well, you wouldn't have a room in Downing Street big enough to take 40 people in a socially distanced way. So if you did want to thank them, the garden is absolutely the right place.
Well...
Secure.
There you go. I guess this might rumble on. David says, get him into a cell and throw away the key. Richard says, give it a rest. It's getting tedious. Richard, I agree. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'll be looking at Bradford Council. It's been stripped of its control of its children's services. This is, of course, in the wake of Star Hobson's murder. Is this the right thing to do? Is this actually going to create the change that seems to be needed?
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for...
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you're watching and listening to Dewbs & Co. Now, Bradford Council is going to be stripped of its control of its children's services. This is in the wake of Star Hobson's murder. The government said that Bradford Council's children's services would be lifted into a trust to drive rapid improvements. The drastic measure followed recommendations from Educational Secretary Nadeem Zahawi to the area's Children's Services Commissioner. Now, got to say, I feel like we sit here and talk over and over and over again about horrific stories of child abuse, many of which kind of result in murders, some of which have been in the press just in recent weeks and months. We'll all remember the awful story, of course, of Star that we've just been discussing and we are discussing. But Arthur Labinjo Hughes, many of you will remember that name and that story as well. And it feels like all the time we have these horrific stories. The sentence is always the same. Social services were involved. People flagged it to social services, and yet that child still ended up dying. Always there seems to be reviews, and I have to say it doesn't really feel like much changes. Joanna Williams, do you think this will be a change that makes the difference?
Well, I think we can desperately hope so. And it seems to me like this really hasn't come a moment too soon. And if this does help to make things better for the children of Bradford, who are the most important people for us to be considering in all of this, then let's really pray and hope that it does. You know, I guess there's two things that I think are worth pointing to. I mean, for one thing, in Bradford, I think this has to be put in the context of an area that does have an awful lot of poverty, and obviously poverty is no excuse whatsoever for horrific child abuse, but there's an awful lot of social problems, a lot of social economic problems in that area, and so it does mean that services are spread very, very thinly. I think also, unfortunately, we do have to put this in the context of lockdown as well. Star Hobson's grandparents, her great-grandparents, just like little Arthur's extended family, had been trying to get in touch with their grandchildren, had been trying to contact the police, and it was lockdown and those restrictions that really took the safety net away from these most vulnerable families in our society. As I said earlier, you know, the idea of locking children up with abusive parents is just beggars belief, but we as a society, we did that. You know, that's what happened. Police actually warned off Arthur's, I think it was his stepfather, you know, not to go round, that he would be arrested if he went round to check on what was happening with that little boy. Now, that's unforgivable, and people need to be held to account for that having taken place. So I really hope that going into a trust does make a big difference for the children in Bradford who are most in need. But like I say, I think there are broader issues that we need to think about as well.
Indeed. Peter?
Well, it's an horrific story, isn't it? Coming so soon after a similar report about the death of Arthur Labinjo Hughes. I think the government had no choice. I think Nadeem Zahawi is fairly new as Education Secretary. I think he's quite a sober and practical character. I may not agree with him on everything, but I think clearly the government had little choice other than to take this action around Bradford Council. I'm very, very cautious about bringing COVID into it too much, because I know, well, they don't know too much about Bradford. Some local authorities have had problems going back many years before the pandemic, and Bradford had an inadequate rating in 2018. So well in advance of the pandemic. But I think we hope some change comes out of it. But I think what we all feel out of this is just distress, isn't it? It's just so saddening. And we hope that this change, which is very significant, taking control away from local authority, delivers very quick improvements.
Yeah, and I mean, I do have to disagree there, Peter, in the sense of I do think this is exacerbated by the lockdown measures, and I think the figures do bear that out. The increase in the number of children referrals to social services, the number of children presented to hospitals with illnesses that are kind of reflective or demonstrative of abuse. And I think in years to come, we will look back actually and do a kind of a benefit analysis or a risk analysis, whatever you want to call it, on these lockdown measures. And we'll see the true cost of them because they're not going to be seen for some time yet.
Perhaps that's subject. I know you want to move on to Daniel, but perhaps that's an important strand of the COVID inquiry, which I think is due to begin shortly.
Yeah, see, I mean, I'm going off on a tangent. Sorry, Daniel, because I do want your views on this. But this is one of the things that always frustrated me about these lockdowns and these measures. Like you just said as well, Peter, at the start of this conversation, you know, we locked down too late. There was never any real consideration about the consequences of lockdown. All people ever wanted, the journalists and people like lots in the Labour Party was pushing, why didn't we go sooner? Why didn't we go harder? Why didn't we go faster? There was never any consideration about the impacts of some of these measures and restrictions. And it's only now that Boris Johnson wants to lift them and people have now got a political agenda against them being lifted. It's only now that people are asking. Oh, have you looked at the impact of lifting these? Have you done this? It's something that's frustrated me for a very long time. But Daniel, I do digress.
But that's quite a serious charge. I want to let Daniel speak, but I don't have a political agenda around restrictions. My concern, like everyone, whether we agree or not, is born out of health. So I think you've got to be very careful of lumping things like child murder in with legitimately views expressed about lockdown, regardless of when it actually stands on these matters. I think there's a slight risk of simplifying
I don't have to be careful at all about saying that with lockdown has had, and we will find this out in more detail in the years and months to come, lockdown has had a catastrophic impact on so much of society. One of the aspects is on child abuse. One of the aspects will be on domestic abuse. I imagine that one of the aspects will be on mental health and things like that. So no, I don't have to be careful in my view of that, because my view is very clear and I stand by my view. I'm very confident in it. We will see, we are already seeing that the impact of these lockdowns will have untold, like, it will be, I cannot even put it into numbers because we don't know the numbers, the impact and the damage that these measures have caused. And there are so many people. Even now, when you brought this in at the beginning, when we was talking about Boris, you were saying that we're locked down too late. Many people was calling for deeper and longer lockdowns, and time will tell. We shall see.
I think you're lumping in something that we're all affected by. It's an horrific story, so I don't dispute the distress it caused to anyone, but I think you're lumping something like that in with kind of routine party politics, and I think they're very distinct.
I'm comfortable in the correlation that I've made. Daniel?
Well, look, on lockdowns, we should do a study of the pros and cons. But I think what we can say for the future, what I would want to say for the future, loud and clear, if I was in charge, is I would say the main purpose of the lockdown was actually to protect the NHS from falling over. There should never be any lockdowns in the future. We should find a better way of protecting the NHS in the future than lockdown, because the costs have just been too great to the economy, but also in the many other ways that have been mentioned round the table. So whether it was the right thing to do 18 months ago, that's a question for study, given what we knew. But what we know now, after that lockdown, I would say never again. Find a better way. On the case of this tragic and evil murder, I was a councillor for many years. I tend to have try to have a degree of sympathy with the local authority, because I understand how difficult it is for them. There are a small number, mercifully small number, of truly evil people out there who have charge of children and who are sometimes treat them so badly that it can lead to serious injury and death. And it's not always that easy to identify them. So you can get hit by one of these things coming at you out of left field, if you like, and it's a tragedy all round, even if you have quite a good service. But I have to say, in the case of Bradford, they do seem to have had plenty of flags put up, plenty of warnings from other members of the family and friends, and it's quite difficult now to say that they should be left to run their own social services. They're putting it in a trust with some sort of independent oversight, I hope. That's what hasn't been mentioned. It's one thing to have an independent trust with a board, but is there somebody really keeping an eye on what they're doing? Gives them a chance to come up to the right standard, and that's what I hope they manage to do.
But Daniel, so briefly, there is a regulator as well, as I understand it. So you would hope there is a system of checks that covers all local authorities as well as the one subject to egregious failures?
I agree with you, but this is a case where it's more than doing the checks that the regulator does. This is one where I think the trust, the new arrangement, needs close, hands-on supervision, week to week, month to month, making sure they're actually driving an improvement.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of special measures in education, isn't it?
That sort of thing.
Well, Anthony has just emailed in saying, Michelle, lockdowns do not cause abuse, bad people cause abuse. Well, what I would say back to that, Anthony, is I completely know that the ultimate perpetrator and responsibility and accountability is, of course, the abuser, but it is undeniable that a child needs support, often from beyond the family unit, because often the abuse is being conducted within the family unit. So when those services fail, I'm sorry, but I do think that they are responsible, and I do think that they should be accountable. And it is undeniable that when you take children out of the school environment, an environment that you would often pick up that abuse is happening in the home, when you take children out of that environment, when you lock a family away, when you almost enclose a family in a circle of secrecy, you're asking for trouble. And by the way, I was a child that was on the social services at-risk register, so I do know a little bit of what I speak. Anyway, I want to bring your attention back to another matter that I feel very passionate about. Hashtag outdate the mandate. Now, if you was watching on Monday, you will know that we started this campaign on this show. What do I refer to? Well, I refer, of course, to the fact that on the 1st of April 2022, so not long now, all health and social care workers in England with contact with patients will need to prove that they have been fully vaccinated unless they're exempt. What that means in practice is that those who haven't been vaccinated will have had to have had their first jab by the 3rd of February next week. Listen, I do not agree with this principle for a variety of reasons, many of which I've gone into at length, so you'll be familiar with them if you are a viewer to this show. We urge the government to reconsider. Why? Because the NHS is on its knees. We've got the highest waiting list now, 6 million. We simply cannot afford to lose tens and tens of thousands of staff. It is absolutely bonkers. And I've been asking you, as part of this campaign, to get in touch and let me know your stories. If you are one of these people that are affected by this, get in touch and let me know. I do still want those stories. You can email them, by the way. We've got a special email box set up for this, which is outdatethemandates@gbnews.uk. Of course, you can always get in touch with me on Twitter as well, @MichelleDewbs. Anyway, Liz Bracegirdle was one of those people who got in touch with me. She's been working as a midwife for the last 10 years in the NHS, and she joins me now. Good evening to you. You are somebody that's going to be affected by this change. Liz, tell me more.
I'm a midwife, as you said. I've been working as an NHS midwife for the last 10 years. I have, for the last year, been on maternity leave. So obviously I'm now looking at returning to work. I've had huge amounts of uncertainty over this. It's really clouded the experience of my maternity leave because obviously I'm sort of waiting to see, hoping really that the government will reconsider, as you said. But I'm waiting to see what my options are and potentially might lose my job over it.
And there'll be people watching this, Liz, that say, well, simple, have your vaccine, then you won't lose your job. What would you say to that?
Okay, so for me personally, my situation is that I'm breastfeeding and I have looked at the risks and benefits. I'm quite competent of sort of assessing risks and benefits. I feel that the risk of COVID infection to me personally is very minimal. And at the moment, I don't feel satisfied with the level of evidence that would suggest whether the vaccine is safe in breastfeeding. So I want to await further evidence, really. So that's my
So you're not saying no to the vaccine. What you're saying is that based on your own personal circumstances, you're saying not yet, maybe in the future. But
I am, absolutely. I'm saying not yet. And I think hopefully, you know, I'm yet to have some discussions with my work. I'm hoping for a sort of redeployment option, maybe. But what I'm saying is I will have it potentially, or I will consider having it either when I'm not breastfeeding or when there's satisfactory evidence. And that's my position. Obviously, lots of other people are choosing not to have it for perfectly valid reasons. And I think that obviously as a health professional, we have to consider the consent element and the fact that everybody in our care is entitled to informed consent, and we're not being allowed that.
And my last question, very briefly to you, Liz, is what would you say to people that would say, well, you're putting your patients at risk?
Absolutely not. I don't think so. I think actually when you look at the basics of patient safety, it's undeniably much more risky to lose tens, like you said, tens and tens of thousands of members of staff rather than having some unvaccinated members of staff working, especially with the recent evidence regarding how long sort of reduced transmissibility element of the vaccine last. I do not feel that this legislation is about patient safety at all, and I think if they were prioritising patient safety, they would not be talking about anything sort of letting go that number of staff when the NHS is on its knees. And I think they're not considering that it's a compounding factor. So if you lose, say, 70,000 members of staff, the people who are left behind are then more overworked, they feel more undervalued, and those people might potentially then leave as well. So actually, it could be the catalyst for the collapse of the NHS, in my view.
OK, Liz Brace-Gettle, thank you very much for sharing your experience. Just for the viewers' clarity there, the Royal College of Midwives have called for a delay on this mandate. Maternity services are already subject to chronic understaffing. Estimates say there's a shortfall at the moment of about 2,000 midwives. Peter Edwards, your thoughts?
I don't support your campaign, I'm afraid.
Get out.
I do. I think people are entitled to their objections, and I think the way to handle that is not to condemn people, it's to give them information. But remember, this has been recommended by the NHS. There's been a very long lead-in for this. We talked about this on your show, I think, in late summer and early autumn.
What's your reason for saying that someone must be vaccinated to keep their role in the NHS? What's your sentiment there?
I think two reasons. One, I think there's been a huge amount of advance notice provided. And secondly, I think when you're talking about numbers, and ultimately we all want to save the maximum number of lives, we all have that in common. I think the greater risk is of unvaccinated staff treating the vulnerable. I think that risks outweighs that of the jab, and I think the risks around the jab are very, very, very small. I'm not saying it's zero risk, but I think they're very, very modest. And I'd also say, and I hope you don't feel I'm rubbishing your campaign, but it's not just I disagree. I think there's no prospect of success if you think about where the government is, and I think there's maybe other measures around the pandemic that perhaps would be a better area of focus.
Well, there you go. That's Peter's thoughts. Joanna?
Well, I suspect your campaign will be successful because I don't think any government minister is going to want to oversee thousands of NHS staff leaving. I mean, the health service is already, we're told, on its knees. I mean, we're told it repeatedly faces crisis. You know, every winter we're having to, the NHS is struggling, so they're not going to want to see staff lose their jobs. I'd rather NHS staff were vaccinated, is the bottom line. I think the vaccine's been an amazing development, but if people are not convinced and they're not going to be persuaded by having it mandated, pragmatically the thing to do is to keep people in their jobs. If anybody's well placed to assess the risk for themselves, and it's people who work for the NHS.
Daniel?
I'm somewhere in the middle on this. Where I disagree with Peter is that he sees it as a cost-benefit analysis between the balance of risks in health, and I see that there's an important element for personal autonomy and decision-making in this. People have to have some level of control over their own lives and their own, what they take into their body. Now, the fact is that 95% of staff in the NHS, at least, have already been vaccinated now. Nearly 100% of doctors. The professional bodies generally have a rule, which is advice to their staff, which is you should be inoculated against contagious diseases. I think people in the NHS should have the vaccine, but I think it should be part of their professional guidance, and it should be a matter of persuasion. It might take a little bit longer. I think the legal mandate is probably inappropriate.
There you go. Do let me know what you think about that. You've heard a cross-section of views there. I am certainly very strong in my view. It cannot all be about the focus on the risk of COVID, because beyond COVID Island, there's a whole sea of other illnesses, ailments, diseases, whatever, that need staff to be present to help care for them. Anyway, I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about technology, specifically driverless cars. When they go wrong, who is to blame? The person in the driver's seat or the company?
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Very good job. Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. Just a quick reminder, by the way, of who the panel is, because I know some of you are listening and not watching. So just as a brief reminder, we have Lord Moylan, who's the former advisor to Boris Johnson and now Conservative life peer in the House of Lords. We've got Peter Edwards, who is the former editor of The Labour List, and Joanna Williams, who's an author and academic. Good evening to all of you, and good evening to all of you watching and listening. Let's move on, shall we? Britain's law commissions have jointly recommended that users of self-driving cars should have immunity from a wide range of motoring offences, including dangerous driving and speeding. The Law Commission for England and Wales said the Scottish Law Commission, have proposed a creation of an Automated Vehicles Act to reflect the legal consequences of self-driving cars. The person in the driver's seat would no longer be responsible for how the car drives. Instead, the company or body that obtained authorisation for the vehicle would face regulatory in the event of anything going wrong. Sounds great. I'm going to go get myself one of these cars. Get off the hook for everything. Daniel, your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm not a great believer in self-driving cars, to be perfectly frank, because outside, they're fine on motorways, but inside cities, I don't really see a role for them, precisely because they do work. And one of the ways in which they do work is that if a pedestrian stands and goes in front of them, they're meant to stop. So anyone crossing the road, and the whole traffic will seize up. So you'll end up with cities where pedestrians are separated, and you go back to sort of, some sort of terrible 1970s road vision. I don't welcome them at all. But on this point, I think what the law commissions of the two, of Scotland and England, need to understand is that if you really want to kill innovation, then this is a really good way to do it. It's also not the case that necessarily the manufacturer of the car is going to be responsible for what happens, because these are network vehicles, and there'll be all sorts of people contributing to this, including, I imagine, at some stage, TfL as regulator. So just being able to say, I'm going to pin it on the manufacturer, means, frankly, there won't be any manufacturers. And if that's what you want, if you want to kill self-drive cars, that's fine. I'm not a great defender of them, but you've got to realise what you're doing.
No, I really share those worries, because I think self-drive cars could be absolutely amazing. I mean, the idea of being able to go out and have a few drinks and yet be able to quite safely and legitimately get in your own car and drive home again at the end of the evening really appeals to me. But I do absolutely share your concerns. I think the consequences of pushing the insurance costs in case anything goes wrong onto the manufacturers or the companies responsible for the cars could build in this kind of real inherent conservatism into the manufacturing process, into the kind of rollout and into the way that they operate, because it could mean that the driver has to take responsibility more often than otherwise, so that the manufacturing company's not held responsible should anything go wrong. And to my mind, that defeats the whole object. Why would I spend so much extra money on having a self-drive car if I can't go out and have a few drinks, if I have to stay sober to be able to drive a vehicle myself at the end of the day? say there's just no point.
Peter Edwards?
I've got huge concerns. I mean, I'd say to motorists and to viewers, these machines are going to rely essentially on computer technology. Has your computer ever failed? Mine has, hundreds of times. And then secondly, so when a computer fails, if it's in a car, that could lead to a death. And then secondly, to go back to the computer's parallel, have you ever achieved financial or legal accountability by ringing up an 0800 number when one of your computers is broken? So imagine trying to do that in, say, the criminal legal system after an accident where someone's been harmed. I think the legal element of it is going to be incredibly complex and convoluted and slow, and I think the physical safety elements of it are alarming.
Although I'm not so worried about the computer-driven side of it, because if you go to trains, for example, trains are much safer when they're driven by computers and not by drivers. The human error is larger, as long as you have the right safety measures built in, like, for example, when it sees a pedestrian, it stops. Trains are safe because they have huge safety measures built in if something goes wrong, but they are, in those circumstances, safer when being driven by a computer, believe me, and you can see it, and they go faster and safer. See it on the Victoria line, Jubilee line, just go down and have a look.
But just briefly on that, Daniel, I mean, and some of these are kind of London examples, I think, like Docklands Light Railway.
I've got a good story I want to share with the
there is an
nation.
element of manual override in that, isn't it, by not a passenger, but actually a guard, for example, a TfL employee?
There's always somebody on the train, yeah.
Right, I've got something very interesting to share with you all. Sayings. Do you use any? Towing the line, eating humble pie, put a sock in it. They're all phrases. I say that last one quite often, I can tell you, even if it's under my breath. Anyway, a new study has found that some traditional phrases are in danger of going extinct as people are confused by them. So do you know your onions when it comes to traditional sayings? It really made me have a little giggle, this one. Do you know what pearls before swine? Do you know what that saying means, Daniel?
Yeah, of course we do.
What does it mean?
It means throwing riches and wisdom in front of those too ignorant to hear it. So it's got nothing to do with the audience and your programme, Michelle.
There you go. Nod's as good as a wink. Joanna, do you know what that means?
Oh, I'd love to say yes. No.
Oh.
You don't know what nod's as good as a wink
Does it
means?
not just mean, like, yes, it's OK?
Oh, well, the proper official definition is only a slight sign is needed for you to understand clearly what is going on. Peter, do you know what stitch in time saves 9 means?
Oh, it's something to do with making a small change to prevent a delay later. What I would say is, you're a Yorkshirewoman. I've lived in Yorkshire very happily. I did for about 6.5 years, and I think Yorkshire is really one of the homes of these types of homilies and phrases, isn't it?
As well. Yes. Well, what that means, stitch in lines, if you sort out a problem immediately, it will save a lot of extra work later on. If you say you've dropped a clanger, do you know what that means? Dropping a clanger?
Yeah, it means making a terrible mistake. I do it on Twitter all the time.
Yes, tell me about it. I like number 21, but I can't read that out because it's got a word in it that I can't room. Flogging a dead horse. Apparently people don't understand what that means.
Oh, I get that one.
Oh, some of these have political crossover. Pursuing a line of argument after it's expired.
Yes, what else? Let's have a look. What else is going on? I can't say that one either. Some of them make me smile. I think I can say stuff.
Well, that's interesting because it shows how when culture changes, these phrases, and some politicians have got in trouble, can become obsolete or unacceptable over quite a quick period, can't they?
They're part of the woke cancel culture. They're being wiped out. I mean, in the House of Lords yesterday, somebody said, you can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, and then corrected themselves to say, maybe I should have said a boar's ear. Now, maybe I was confused.
Oh, dear me. Do you know what I think it is?
What is the point?
I think we're just all getting old. And when you get old, the kids have no idea what we're talking about and look at us daft. Anyway, that is all we've got time for. Daniel Moylan, Peter Edwards, Joanna Williams, thank you for your company. Thank you at home for your company as well. Have a good evening. And I'll see you the same time tomorrow, 6 o'clock until 7.
Good evening. A windy one tonight. Those winds steadily easing tomorrow. For most of us, a bright, fine day with sunny spells and certainly across the south. Feeling really quite mild, much milder in recent days. High pressure is just about holding on, but we do have this deepening area of low pressure just tracking to the north of Shetland, and those isobars really pinching together. So the wind's getting very strong across northern Scotland tonight. We have a Met Office yellow warning in place across Orkney in the far north of the mainland. Gusts of 70, maybe 75 miles an hour could cause some disruption. At the same time, a zone of rain will slink its way from southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, parts of northern England and Wales. But with all the clouds and the very strong winds, temperatures will be holding up for most of us well above freezing. Will be a dull, damp start though for parts of Wales, particularly South Wales in the morning. Some of that patchy rain will trickle into Somerset, Devon and Cornwall through the morning as well. Not much rain further east, and brighter skies follow. So it's sunny spells for much of Thursday, but there will be showers in the far northeast, wintry on the hills, and a cold feel here with the wind. But elsewhere, temperatures well above the average and quite a bit higher than recent days. 10 or 11 degrees, Manchester, Belfast, London, Southampton, maybe 12. Quite quickly though, those temperatures dropping during Thursday evening as the winds continue to ease. Light winds, clear skies could still lead to a frost for Friday morning. So a colder start on Friday morning, but again, generally dry and bright with some good spells of sunshine. It'll probably steadily cloud over from the west during Friday. Rain in northern Scotland, patchy rain at times, Northern Ireland, northwest England and Wales. But again, much of the east will be dry. Temperatures perhaps not quite as high on Friday, but still a bit milder than it has been. So chopping and changing a little bit more as we go into the weekend in particular. Generally temperatures on their way up, but there is the possibility, that's all it is at this stage, of a wet and windy spell for some of us on